Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming for the last meeting of the branch this year and the last in-person meeting. I'll be recording this for 2 or 3 people who cannot join, and admittedly for me and my personal history. I'm leaving the UN after 30 years. 3rd of January 1995, it was a Tuesday, and I checked up the weather forecast. It coincides with my memory. It was rainy in London. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in London, my first working day for the United Nations Family, for the IMO, where I worked 2 years, and I worked for CEPAL or ECLAC, and then for UNCTAD. And my first working day in Washington will be the 3rd January 2025. I do not yet know whether it will be rainy or not. But still, it's 30 years. And with your indulgence, I thought after 30 years of us working together for the United Nations, I asked ourselves, did we make a difference? Because somehow you look back and ask yourself, okay, what did we actually do together? What did we achieve? And as you know, I also like photography, so I thought, let me pick some 30 photos, 30 stories, more or less in chronological order. And some stories are longer, some are shorter. The idea is really to reflect, to leave it, because life goes on, we move on, and sometimes things may be forgotten. And I hope you find some of this interesting and helpful, and not just for me to save me the money for the psychologist, but maybe also for you. Chronologically, number 1, you have heard it, the internalization of externalities. The photo is from my hometown in Hamburg. It's Blankenese. I think, is it okay, the photos? Yeah, I think it can all be seen. So for me, it's a beautiful photo, the composition, and Hamburg, and how big the ships are, the impacts they have. So while working on the PhD and teaching on public goods and the internalization of externalities, so my very first paper for the UN family was for the IMO in London, where I introduced this concept, the internalization of costs. Some of you have worked with me on the IMO, they've heard that story, apologies for repeating. And I'm not going to explain the concept here now, don't worry. But I did explain it in London to people who were much better paid than me at that time. So I imagine a younger and slimmer young than now, 30 years ago, enthusiastically explaining to one D2 who was a lawyer and one D2 who was an ex-Coast Guard the beauties of the internalization of externalities, meaning the polluter pays and the private sector decides how to either compensate or clean or avoid. And after the conversation, I overheard how one of the D2, the lawyer, asked the other one, the Coast Guard, what is Hoffman talking about? This internationalization of externalities. And I think the IMO has come a long way. They have by now understood it's not about internationalizing, it's about internalizing. And as some of you know, I've spent quite some time also personally, I'm really convinced of that concept, the idea of a levy, of charging for negative externality, for pollutions, for greenhouse gas emissions. For many years, I've spoken with Simon Bennett, Chamber of Commerce, with colleagues, and I just like to live in the illusion that I may have made a difference. And in the end, if now with all together we put it into the review of maritime transport, it's in the official foreword of our Secretary General. We have worked with SITS, we have worked with the World Bank, we've worked with the IMO, with the Global Maritime Forum. It is now official UNCTAD position that it's a good thing to have some economic measure. For me it is one early on story where I like to believe if ever that comes, and in some countries and regions it has come, that levy or price on carbon, maybe we made a little difference. Story number 2, the maritime country profiles. At the IMO we were organizing seminars, events, and it was always 2 participants per country. And I somehow thought, as a young enthusiastic economist, maybe it would make sense that for flag state implementation, FSI, you would invite more people from Panama than from, I don't know, other countries. Maybe for port state control, let's focus on Brazil. Maybe for the ISM code, Chile. Maybe for STCW, Honduras, which is exporting seafarers. So for me to illustrate who is, like which country participates in which segment of the maritime industry, I developed these country profiles. And fast forward, today at UNCTAD, we have with our friends from STAD, we have 233-page country profiles, which I find are very helpful. They are being used. They show every country's participation in different segments, and then you go to a country and you work and you know whether to focus on the port state, on the flag state, the shipbuilding, ship owning. And I'm quite confident with they are now well established, people expect them, and that they will continue to survive our dear beloved maritime country profiles. Story number 3, the data set on maritime transport costs, or of grammar. So when I started in ECLAC, we were asked, okay, we have to have to help countries to reduce their costs, to be more competitive. I said, okay, but what are the costs? So with the intern at that time, even younger and even more enthusiastic than me, Joachim Fuchsluger, we found magnetic tapes in the cellar of ECLAC, where the raw data of what is today Comtrade was recorded. And we found the CIF and FOB values and developed together this BTI, Base de Datos de Transport Internacional. The funny thing is, a couple of years later, there was a flooding in ECLAC, and these magnetic tapes were actually lost. So it is only thanks to our digitalization that they survived, and we still have, at least for Aladi countries, these 10 countries, the data set since 1997. And now I can say, thanks to ONU, ANU, Hasiba, Hidenovo, we have it here, we have the funding from Martin, Dominique, World Bank, and ECLAC, we had Gabriel, Gordon Wilmsmeyer, also Gustavo, and then Joachim. I really want to say there's a whole working together, which now has a project, was funded by the World Bank, and it's a great data set that is available to the world. So a little remaining impact, I hope, and I'm confident of this data set. Story number 4, megaports. And I started also making enemies. Yeah. There was one meeting in Iquique, where the mayor of Iquique had invited, there were 150 people in the room from all over the world, from some free zones, and he put on the map, on his PowerPoint, a world map where Iquique was in the middle of the world. The Pacific Ocean had shrinked, and he said the trade between Europe and China will pass through Iquique. And already at that time I was trying to be diplomatic, and I was trying not to move nothing. Still, on the next Saturday morning in the El Mercurio, which is the main Chilean newspaper, they ridiculed their political enemy, the mayor of Iquique, and they said, to all this, Dr. Hoffmann from CEPAL could only smile. And I was sure I didn't smile. I promised not to move my face, but apparently it showed. So yeah, no, I did papers, presentations, being skeptic about the potential of megaports in South America. Here you see a photo from crossing the Andean Mountains. this is not a good way to move lots of cargo over long distances to then cross the Pacific Ocean, which is half of the world. And the other photo in the middle is the Bay of Mejillones in the middle of the desert, and it has still not become a megaport. And I may have been a bit arrogant at that time. I used to say 30 years ago, I don't think there will be any megaport until my retirement. Okay, I have now 3 more weeks until my retirement from the UN, and there's no megaport in Mejillones, but there is something coming up in Chancay, in Peru, which is an interesting story because that is investment by a shipping company. So you don't need to wait to be attractive to other shipping companies, you do it yourself. So maybe I just about cut the corner before my retirement, and it'll be there. But it was something which was at that time quite controversial. I made some enemies, but I hope we made an impact of not having white elephants and unnecessary investments. Story number 5 is working with academia. That photo is from the Panama Canal, Neo-Panamax, with the city in the front. So in 2002, we organized the first conference of the International Association of Maritime Economists in Latin America with the Panama Canal Authority. I really want to still thank Rolf Sabonge, some of you know. And it really was a great success. At that time, the IAMI conference, I later on became president of that association, and in that function I was also able to somehow motivate votes and interests and applications to have the first IAMI conference in Africa, where we together did an ad hoc expert meeting with Hasiba. And for me, this collaboration with academia it's important, an important part of our work. UNCTAD calls itself a think tank. And some of the things I've seen recently about like don't put your name on things and don't get involved. To us, rather like you feel you have to apologize for doing some of this work. I have always considered if I peer review a journal paper or I publish something under my name with a disclaimer, or I'm a member of a board of a journal, or when I was president, so there were people who said, oh, this is an outside activity. No, I really would like to encourage you. That's part of the job, to disseminate, to learn, to be a multiplier, to help other multipliers. And fortunately, I have a video somewhere on YouTube still where the previous Secretary General Kitui says to the audience of IAMI in Mombasa, thank you, Hasiba and Jan, who are here, and they are our ambassadors to the IAMI. So I could show this and say, look, it's not an outside activity. So I think that's something important to improve our impact, to get this input, latest research before it's published, but also to help research, to help multipliers, to help students. That's working with academia. Next one is working with the private sector. Oh, yes, so family background, Hoffmann Shipping. On the left is my father with his first own ship, and Jan and his younger brother. To the right is the wife of Captain Hoffmann, my mother, Helga, and the cute one there at that time, that's me. So my background is private sector. I grew up with family having skin in the game, taking a mortgage on the house, mortgage on the ship. And I also, while studying, worked in import-export. My first travel to Africa was actually, I was 25, I think. Later on I have one more photo from that travel for a Spanish company. And I have a longish CV that somewhere says, export mission to Benin, West Africa, unsuccessfully trying to sell Spanish gift articles to the West African market. So I'm honest, we didn't sell anything, but it was an interesting vision. We have tried to keep foot in the door. Several of us are members of the Propeller Club, which is private sector in Geneva, and I really think that's also important, like not just our public sector members and clients, but keep a foot in the door, see what are the concerns, interests, vested interests, whatever, of the private sector. Story 7, cabotage, coastal shipping. I had a friendly reminder 2 days ago when Roxana and team organized this for Peru. So that photo is from northern Chile, and the ship is one of the few ships that used to do cabotage along the Chilean coast. The story here was that I got a phone call from a friend at the National Shipping Association of Chile. Hello, Jan, how are you? How's the family? By the way, this paper you wrote about liberalizing cabotage, is this your own personal opinion, or is this official ECLAC opinion? And I was smelling, oh, he wants something. He wants me to distance myself, or the organization to distance it from my working paper. And I explained, no, there's a disclaimer, it's under my name. Ah, yeah, thank you, saludos a la familia. Next day, the executive, what is it from, in ECLAC, not Secretary General, but the Executive Director. Executive Secretary, Jose Antonio Campo of ECLAC, receives a letter, quite nasty, I found, about the supposed expert Jan Hoffmann, who claims this and that, and if this wrong opinion is actually the opinion of ECLAC, or it is just the personal opinion of Mr. Hoffmann. Because they wanted to show to their members that, look, this idea is not official. And the response of the Jose Antonio Campo was amazing. I was really proud at the time of that organization. Dear so-and-so, thank you, of course, blah, blah, diplomatic. The mandate of ECLAC is to support sustainable development, regional integration, and competitiveness of Latin America, the Caribbean. Research by ECLAC has shown that a regional agreement of cabotage and some liberalization will help with sustainable development, because it takes off cargo off the road, regional integration, because it allows networks to connect, and the region's competitiveness. If you have any further questions, please contact Jan Hoffmann. I was so proud and happy, and that is a story which I think later on, I know in Chile, who knows, maybe even that case of Peru, I know that the work we did at that time, and also Jan Anker, we had a paper with Luisa on cabotage, just perhaps our work made a little difference in making cabotage a bit more easier to support sustainable development, regional integration, and competitiveness. Story number 8. Port reform, private sector participation. Gonzalo, you remember that story. So I had taken this photo, for example, long ago in Rio Janeiro, in Dominican Republic. And at a conference which took place on the 11th September 2001, date I coincidentally remember because later we saw some horrible aeroplanes running into towers while we were in Costa Rica at a conference on CNN. So in this horrible context, I had in the morning or the day before, I had shown this photo, and as a bad example, it's like, no, you don't need that many people. And yeah, it was really in not very well functioning port. And I said, I'm not going to say in which country that is to the Latin American conference, because I also like to dance merengue. And somehow the people in the room, they all somehow knew I was talking about Dominican Republic, because that's where you dance merengue. So I actually received an official complaint, quite sharply motivated, that I was ridiculing the culture of the Dominican Republic and so on and so forth. Not good. But what was it, Gonzalo, like 22 years later, when we went back to Rio Janeiro, they still remember that story. And some of them think that maybe, just possibly, bringing this to their attention and this little scandal might have triggered further reform and waking up. And right now it's an amazing port. They showed me the place. Yeah, look, that place now, it was clean, it was empty, there were gantry, for instance. So who knows if we made a difference in that one. And another one where we definitely did make a difference was in El Salvador. I had done a poll, I had some surveys and some ranking of advances in private sector participation in Latin American ports. At the very bottom of the ranking at that time were El Salvador and Uruguay. So my impact of that survey was twofold. First, I was uninvited from a seminar in Uruguay. A friend called me, Jan, tomorrow you will receive an email and somebody will say, this is, the weather has changed, or some excuse, but the reason is the following. The other impact was in El Salvador, where they said, finally somebody is showing how we are not advancing. So they asked us to organize a seminar for parliamentarians of El Salvador in Valparaiso and in Santiago and in San Salvador. And I have in writing from America Hidalgo, who was advisor to the president, that thank you, Jan and team. Thanks to our seminar, a law that modernizes the ports in El Salvador was approved. So there, I know that we had an impact on port reform in El Salvador. Story number 9, determinants of transport costs. This is Tubarão. At that year, they moved 90 million tons of cargo per year, 90 million tons. I was just checking the numbers, and what I remembered was correct. So they move on this conveyor belt, I think up to 16,000 tons per hour. Then oh shit, no, I'm sorry. I thought I had other 2 photos who disappeared. So if I remember the good old Hoffman shipping, general cargo, tweed decker, 1,100 deadweight, you can calculate yourself. If you move 16,000 tons per hour, our dear little ship that I was proud of and thought was a big ship would be filled in 4 minutes. Yeah? So if you switch off the conveyor belt 10 seconds too late, it sinks our ship. So that's economies of scale. And for me, having worked as a seafarer and having been on that, I thought, big ship with 1,100 tons of cargo, but then you see these huge economies of scale and how this helps reduce transport costs. Now I finally come to this work, talking about impact. So in terms of academic impact, some of you may know there exists something called academic impact factor. There are some age indicators, some different impact factors. And a paper I co-authored on the determinants of maritime transport costs is my most cited paper, 501 times on Google Scholar. I checked yesterday. So for an academic, that's my biggest impact. I have the impact of being quoted with this paper. It was based on this data set, which I mentioned earlier, explaining 6 key determinants of transport costs. And yes, this is being quoted and helps. Some things, yes, we all know. Yes, we know that better trade facilitation reduces shipping costs. We know that better infrastructure, we know better, less imbalance. I mean, there are different determinants, but there we were able to quantify it. And I think that's, in terms of impact, for those of us who wrote that paper, our biggest academic impact. The WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement proved the opposite. I think, I hope that, well, not that I hope, but I think it may well be that without our work during the negotiations, maybe that agreement would not have materialized. You know, it was one of the 4 Singapore issues. The other 3 did not materialize. So, and I joined here the trade section after being first in transport in 2004. The negotiations started. We helped during 10 years with technical notes, with events in Geneva on special differential treatment, on different aspects. We had external experts at our meeting, like a gentleman from the ECE. His name was Paul Hansen. He was invited to help us with explaining transit to the delegates. We did needs assessments in the countries. I had very specific conversations where an ambassador of a country who has to deal with hundreds of different topics, from health to property rights to ILO and have you, and he said, yeah, should I sign or should I not sign? And in my view, he should sign, and he did. And I really think it's good for development, as with the chicken and the egg. Of course, more developed countries find it easier to implement trade facility reforms, but also trade facility reforms help to develop. So, prove the opposite. I find it interesting. So the multilateral machinery, the negotiations part of ACTA, is not just meetings in this room or in room 26, but it's also support we give to other agencies such as WTO or IMO. Afghanistan. Very difficult, very sad story. So we had a World Bank funded project in Kabul to support the Ministry of Commerce. I myself went 4 times between 2007 and 2010. Could tell many stories there. So how our consultant Philip Cabanus was interrogated by the Secret Service, stories about corruption. But I did for quite a few years live in the illusion and thought we had a positive impact. With FIATA, we trained freight forwarders, a certified freight forwarder course. Afghanistan's accession to the WTO went ahead thanks to our support. They are still member today. We had a transit agreement for trade between Pakistan and Central Asia and Afghanistan to Karachi, which is also still in force. And Reza, our colleague from Asikuda, told me actually this is still being used. There's actually more transit today going through Afghanistan under that agreement than before the Taliban took over. Is this thanks to the Taliban? Yes, because before the Taliban took over, they were shooting at the trucks and they were not going. So what was our impact apart from those 4 areas, the capacity building? We insist on having also female staff. So I think the people we trained, they take this with them. Except for 1 of the 10 local staff we had, 9 out of 10 are now living abroad. Refugees in India, working in Germany, working in Canada, a refugee to the US. One of my team members at that time was on the last plane. You have seen it on TV. That's horrible. He had asked me for help. I couldn't help. I called. And really, really horrible. Then he went to Qatar with his Saidi, for those who remember, Saidi, with his wife, who was a teacher. She worked as a teacher for girls, teacher of English. So that's not really a favorite topic for Taliban, I guess. So he was really afraid and he flew out. And when he arrived in the United States, another of my ex-staff wrote to me, "Dear Jan, guess who just arrived?" I called him, "You?" and say, "Yes." And that other ex-staff colleague, Hashimi, he had gone earlier to the US as a lawyer, and he volunteered to help newly arrived Afghan refugees. And he just helped his previous boss to settle down. That's quite a strong, tough story. I want to thank Reza, who's still working there. I think it's good. Well, that's the Afghanistan story. Not sure. There are many doubts we all have about our impact in the end, ultimately, but I like that photo there, the West. I don't think the West is there anymore, but it was there on that photo. Liner shipping networks. Nothing to do with that photo, it's just a net, but I like that photo, so I squeezed the very forced association, but I love that photo of a fisher on the Niger River casting his net. So similar to the transport cost data set, which we developed because we were asked to reduce transport costs. Say, okay, let's first measure transport costs. By the same token, say, okay, we have to improve connectivity, we have to improve access to foreign markets. How do we measure this? So in 2004, we developed the Liner Shipping Connectivity Index for the countries and also for the ports. We developed a bilateral index, and it's all hard data. We revised it once, but it's something I think we can still be proud of. It has been used quite a lot in academic research. You can find almost every IAME conference these days has papers on the chicken and egg, connectivity and trade costs. There are member countries of UNCTAD who have their LSCI in their KPIs. I need to improve my ranking and position. It's soon going to be 20 years old. The longer we have it, UNCTAD, the better, the more you can analyze, you can see causalities, look at trends, and it's thanks to MDS Transmoder and Antonella that I'm confident that this will stay on. Competition. Not sure, I like that photo. The big ones eating the little ones. George and Messina will remember that joint mission when we had 3 appointments in the morning, first with the ministerial director, then with the head of the National Trade Physician Committee. One was 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. The third one was the Enhanced Integrated Framework focal point. So we come to the office and we meet gentlemen who gives us 3 business cards. It's all himself. It's one person who was director of trade, head of the Trade Physician Committee, and the focal point. So instead of 3 hours, we had 1 hour meeting, which gave us time to visit the Holy Crocodiles. And then arriving at the Holy Crocodiles, some guy said, so how many chicken do you want? Yeah, no, you have to give food to the Holy Crocodiles. And Ava and I naively, sincerely expected him to go to the freezer and pick out a dead chicken. But no, he went behind the kiosk and burp, burp. So anyhow, so that chicken in there, it used to live. And so that's the story, but now coming to competition. So actually my first study for ECLA was on concentration. We had special chapters on competition issues here at the Review of Maritime Transport. We had sessions together with the Trade Division on competition, on the Code of Conduct. And I hope that over the years we have contributed to a better understanding between the shippers and the carriers. We work with both, with the World Shipping Council, with the Chamber of Shipping, with the Global Shippers Forum, with the Global Shippers Alliance, with the freight forwarders. I'm just trying to have one or no, sorry. Yeah, there could be more stories about vertical integration, which I think is a concern. So if a shipping line becomes also a port operator, I definitely think UNCTAD is well positioned there as a neutral partner to discuss and contribute to the discussion. What does it mean, the vertical integration, the horizontal integration, the alliances, and yeah, be a neutral partner with shippers and carriers. Maritime statistics online. So why do I think of that story? Well, I just find it so funny that the goat is plural of goats, several goats. The grain they're eating here comes originally from Argentina. And I was following the goats, so the grain arrived on these Laker ships across Lake Victoria to Uganda. It was put in a lake port in Tanzania. It arrived there by rail from Dar es Salaam, where it arrived by ship from Buenos Aires, where it arrived with some barges, probably from Zarate, where it arrived by rail, by road, by harvest. All this so that these dear goats could be fed, because normally, I'm not sure if you would have goats in a port, but I had a little bit the feeling that the port workers had a private business aside to feed goats and sell them. So What does this have to do with maritime statistics? Well, it's the ships, it's the port traffic, the seaborne trade, which we monitor, and over the last 10, 15 years, we have expanded our online coverage of these statistics. It used to be just a printed annex or PDF. And at some point in time we said, look, we have more and more data. We have also more and more years of data. We have better technology, so let us not force people to buy our review or to download the PDF, but rather also maybe to have the data. Trade information portals. Why do I just have more photos? Yeah, about 10 years ago, I got a call from the BMZ, the German Ministry of Cooperation. Jan, I have €1 million. I want to invest them in trade facilitation in Western Africa. What can you propose? And I certainly cannot claim credit for having, or even that our group here has developed the trade information portal. That goes to Frank, Julian, Chiata, Mita from the investment. But I do claim credit that some of our predecessors did not really want to collaborate. And I like to collaborate. So in the end, Frank is a very good negotiator. So out of those 1 million, I think he got 3/4, and our branch got only 1/4. Sorry, but at least I think it was good that we developed that. I think we now have about, you would know better at Trade Fair, we have about almost 30 countries with trade information portals. We collaborate with the with the ITC. For the record, and this is being recorded, our UNCTAD trade information portals are better than the trade information portals of the World Bank. I have said it, it's recorded. They do not only help countries to comply with Article 1 of the Trade Facilitation Agreement, but they help analyze where can we improve and streamline and reduce steps. And there have been real case stories. We have now put them in some of our documents, where in the Pacific and West and Eastern Africa, our trade information portals have helped countries to comply with the TFA, but also really objectively cut red tape. Serious games and training, that's just a nice photo I like in Vietnam. People after university throwing their hats, very proud. UNCTAD is, among other things, a capacity building organization. So a lot of what we do is teaching, is passing on, is building capacity. At university level, we teach at World Maritime University. Several of us have been to Malmö. We do e-learning programs in trade station. We do, of course, the platforms, Trade for Trade. The Port Endeavor game, which is something that started here at the Palais des Nations, meetings between IAPH and UNCTAD. And I think this very important part of our work has impacted thousands of people. And we have a lot of stories, a lot of feedback. We go to LinkedIn, Facebook, and people proudly posting their certificates. And for many of our clients and people, this is something very important we can also be proud of. Collaboration on trade facilitation. That's a photo from the port of Cotonou. Sometimes when we are allowed to go behind the scene, we can see, these are the poor traders or truck drivers who want to get some paper, some authorization. Trade facilitation and logistics lives from collaboration, lives from working together. And when we started having Beer of the Month, when we had the ITC and ECE and UNCTAD initially, then later on other organizations came aboard, initiatives like the GFP, Global Facilitation Partnership, Some for All. I think it's important to always lean back, and when you say us and them, who is us, who is them? I personally very likely, very early on, put the us much broader. And I would encourage all of us to try this. There's enough work. We are to produce the public good. We are paid for by taxpayers' money. Let's continue to collaborate, and I think a lot of the work we do, especially in trade facilitation, but also in all other areas, let's try to see the us in a broader thing. I think what we did in trade facilitation was a good example. Adapting to new technologies. I just thought it's a nice photo reserved for dynamic. I think we are all very dynamic. That was in Liberia. We have just last week, was it, or 2 weeks, the blockchain course. We had an MOU with the International Chamber of Commerce Brazil section on trade intelligence, ITTI, about AI 2017, before we knew the term ChatGPT. So I think overall we are good, we are in time, we are maybe even a bit ahead of the curve in some of the topics to apply these technologies for our clients, our members, but also ourselves. You may remember, some of you remember COVID?
No.
You remember Skype? Before we were all sent home to work from home, our branch was the first one, and to my knowledge the only one, that tested Skype in our work offices. Some of you remember, we all said, go to your office, connect to Skype, and that is where we practiced mute, and camera on, camera off, headset, and so on. And maybe we were a little bit better prepared when the next day we were all sent home. So I think overall adapting to new technologies for our clients and for ourselves is something also important. Then we had our development account connectivity project. Connectivity, we are all connected, like on this photo from Vietnam. I'm not sure if this guy has an overview who's connected with whom, but I just find it a nice photo composition. I think we can be proud that we had this convening power at UNCTAD for a $5 million project. We were able to jump on a running train. We had just developed e-learning material under trade station, and then we were ready. Asikuda was ready with existing programs. We did insist that we have to use staff, XP staff. Some of you may know, maybe not. Under the UN development accounts, normally you are only allowed to pay for consultants or travel or service, but you cannot pay staff. And when we started this, I spoke with New York and I said, I insist, I'm so sorry. I wasn't, but well, I said, I'm sorry, but there's no way we can do such a big project at such short notice without being able to use existing staff. So we pay some of you extra budgetary staff with this development, and I think it showed how the United Nations, we all, the UN, we the UN, could respond to this crisis and help in the area of digitalization, resilience building in trade logistics. Decarbonization of maritime transport. Different photos, one from a ferry, the other two are from Comoros, somebody getting fuel into his car, the little one. Our impact assessments, depends how you count, we have done 2, 3, or even 4 projects with the IMO, applied a unique, novel methodology. We had our special chapter in the review. Prove the opposite, but I really think that the IMO process at MEPC may very well have been half a year late, delay, or 1 more session delayed if we had not helped negotiators with the impact assessment, getting up at 3 in the morning and checking Excel calculations and so on. So the last one we did was not approved by the member states. another long story. We were not happy, and they didn't like the results, but the results are what they are. They are amazingly accurate and fantastic. And even though some member states didn't like it, I'm confident that our work did contribute to the decarbonization of maritime transport. Then, of course, we did the Global Supply Chain Forum. Started with an empty page, and we can't claim credit. The idea was not ours, but we didn't complain. When we started with an empty page, we showed our convening power with 6 external donors, 100 knowledge partners, everybody kind of worked. In the end, we had 1,000 people coming, and not just a one-off event, but as I said, a Netflix series. So you will deal with the next one. You will produce the next one in Saudi Arabia, and I think, not sure if it's official, but it seems to be agreed. The one thereafter in 2028 likely to be in China. Talk about Netflix series. Do you know how Elena and I, my wife and I, how we prepare for Washington every evening?
House of Cards.
House of Cards. True story. Parentheses. Don't give me spoilers. We are 2/3 through, I think. Bon. What would the world be without shipping? I just like these photos. Some have to do with shipping, some don't, but all the different impacts. So it was actually during the Global Supply Chain Forum that we had one of the projects with World Maritime University to do a video. It is somewhere on YouTube. I think it's a very nice video. We did not do the video. We produced the data and the story. It was the Greek Ship Owners Association, or the Union of Greek Ship Owners, who did the video. But in terms of impact and our work, it's not a major impact that you can measure, but having, after all this work, and what would the world be without us, or without shipping, I think it's a story video we can also be proud of. Books. I'm now a bit broader than other things. You know, I love books. That photo here is from Chad. It's a bookshop in N'Djamena. And those of you who were here 8 years ago, you may still have a book that I gave to you as a gift when I started here in that position. The Art of Thinking Clearly by the Swiss author Rolf Duvelli. If you still have it, if you don't have it, maybe I buy some more ones. I love that book. It's about, avoiding irrational thinking or understanding heuristics. For me, the books are a very important part of the life-work balance. That's how it's called, no? Life-work balance?
Work-life.
No, it's life-work balance. So for me, it's this books, and there are several books who tell you something. Books tell you that books are much better than journals and other things. Of course, maybe if I read a journal, it would tell me the opposite, but I really think, I hope that the reading, listening to books and passing them on, recommending and giving away books rather than storing them has also an impact on our peace of mind and on the life-work balance. I created actually a German language book club here in Geneva, which I handed over a few months ago, and that may also stay. Don't be afraid of heights. That's the Port Crane collection. What I do like for our work, as much as possible, let's all try to get our hands dirty. So here you have it. Document. Dirty hands. I like climbing up gantry cranes. No, Mark, we went together on one of them.
You're not finished, huh?
Huh? It's finished?
No, you are not finished.
No, I'm still, I think I have 28 or 29 cranes so far. So I keep dirtying my hands, but it's not just it's crossing a border on foot between Burundi and DRC, or take a boat between 2 islands in the Comoros. So there are things you just get your hands dirty. For me, it's like this life-work balance, remember, impacts on you much better, and you get a better feeling of what work means for life. What do I have here? Like mentoring and thesis support. Didn't know what photo to put there, but I've always enjoyed working with students, with mentees, with interns. I've myself benefited from people helping me, and I like to pass it on, and I find it also very rewarding working with students, with interns, with younger people, and I want to encourage all of you to also pass on. Don't keep things just to yourself. Having an impact and being impacted. Then I have my empirical research on trade in goods and trade in services. That's my hairdresser in N'Djamena. And I'm not sure if I liked the result of that haircut. The good thing is things grow. You know how all this started was haircuts. She didn't like some of them either, but at 84 haircut countries, maybe I get into Guinness Book of Records one of these days. That one I keep trying. It's among this getting your hands dirty. It's among this getting out. Don't stay in the hotel room. The hairdressers are nice people, and most of them. And most of the time you don't get into trouble. The last one, some of you may have seen, the very last one was in Algeria, where I was at a hairdresser at a street where the president passes by sometimes, and that caused some difficulties. Let's leave it there. For me, that was one more story of Haircut Country 84, but it's certainly something that has direct impact, at least on my hair. There we are, networking. That photo fits about networking. So you get out. I just now checked, I have 22,000 connections on LinkedIn. And it's just, you have to love people and get on the ground. This one is on an island on the river Niger. And I'm telling the little guy that please look into the camera, but somehow he finds it much more funny to look at the funny guy who's pointing the finger. So for me, that's part of the networking experience. In that case, didn't have any common language, but somehow they are documented and in the story of networking. And all this, I took my family with me, or she took me with family. There's Elena looking at the storm, and so when I say about we and our impact, we have lived together in 6 countries. I think it strengthens the family. If you survive all this, if it works, it's good, but it's also a challenge. Tip of the day, you should marry at the age of 21, and the ideal thing is a teacher of foreign languages with you. This working together helps you the 3 sons could study abroad. Thank you, UN Education Grant. It may also have helped that I liked my job, that we could move together. I think I have one more here. Oh, yes. Well, this is, can you read what it says? So, I don't know, it does help to travel, and that's how you have, what is it now, 37 years. But I want to really acknowledge this whole impact and working together, and of course, is also the family. And then we did settle down in Geneva. We loved it here. We got stuck. We got frozen. Some of you have had farewell messages from me. Well, you're still here. You haven't had farewell messages. But those who are not here, who have had farewell messages from me, I tend to write, the only thing permanent in life is change, parentheses, and Jan's farewell messages. That's also always the same. But there we are. It is true. Things go on. There we are. I choose my battles. I won't say much more here. I've been criticized by my ex-first reporting officer of being too nice and not being tough enough. And there are limits. So I choose my battles, and I usually win. No, I have to correct myself. I always win. It's another photo taken with an 800 millimeters zoom macro. And I think here's another photo of a very young, trying to get a snake off his neck. I've always been like Klassensprecher, class speaker, or head of the student union, and somehow I did fight a lot, but when I thought something is really, really wrong, I think, yeah, you have to do something. So that was number 30, and if you think that was the last one, no, there's one more, the bonus. Only one photo, we together. So it's one of the many photos that we took at branches or at happy hours, or in this together, different families, and separating or not, the life-work balance. But I want to thank all of you for being part of this journey. Thank you all.